The missions really were the beginning of San Antonio. The missions, as well as San Fernando Cathedral, were the beginning of the city. And so it's interesting that the city of San Antonio began with a spiritual effort to convert the local indigenous peoples, the Native Americans, as well as to bring in some colonists from the Canary Islands that would form the beginning of a civic settlement. But these missions were the Spanish effort to not only Christianize the Indians, but also to make them good Spanish citizens. So the missions formed a kind of a platform for which the Spanish could extend their rule to Texas and to begin to kind of create here the Spanish civilization that they wanted to have, so they could control the whole southwestern part of what is now the United States. The missions are kind of a symbol of our culture, of our history, of our heritage, of the kind of the spirit of San Antonio. Because if you really think about it, just to establish these missions and to build these missions took incredible commitment and energy and spirit and spirituality and time and effort on the part of the Franciscan friars who came. And the fact that they worked with the Native Americans to build these fantastic, beautiful structures that we have that are really treasures of San Antonio, that now attract literally millions of people every year. And now with World Heritage status, we expect a big bump in the numbers, especially from Europe and from Asia, because many people throughout the world, when they're going to take a vacation, they look at where are the World Heritage sites, and that's where we want to go. So I foresee that we're going to continue to increase the tourism here in the missions, and that will continue to have an impact on the economy of San Antonio, but also on the wonderful blend of peoples that we already have here in San Antonio, that we'll be having and welcoming people from all over the world, and that they'll be able to see this fantastic bilingual, bicultural community that we have with its deep, deep historical roots that really, in a sense, identify and name who we are. So I think it's a very exciting time for the city of San Antonio as well as for the missions. One of the main reasons that UNESCO designated the missions as a World Heritage Site was what they called the universal human value. And that value they saw as the fact that the missions, the 4 churches within the park, are all active parishes. They are continuing to do what the missions began to do almost 300 years ago. And that there's this unbroken, in many ways, activity of the human spirit here at the missions. And so we do not only the religious services, but then we do a lot of the cultural services, things that we, for example, celebrate all of the feast days. We celebrate a lot of the Hispanic traditions. We bring in all kinds of people to do that. We have picnics on the lawn, we have concerts, we have parties, we have all kinds of things that indicate that there's life here. So there's spiritual life on Sundays, and weddings and baptisms and funerals, but there also is the life, the ongoing life of the people as they gather together. That these missions, which originally were the gathering sites of the local community, now continue to do that in a whole new way 300 years later. That's what really got the attention of UNESCO, and that's one of the key reasons why we are now a World Heritage Site. I'd say one of the most important historical values that the Alamo has is that it was the first of the missions, that it was founded in 1718, and in fact that's the reason we're going to have the 300th anniversary in 2 years, because it's pegged on the founding date, May the 1st, 1718, when the Alamo was founded, was begun. And so the Alamo ends up being a very important mission, not only because it's the first, but also because then it functions as a mission for almost 100 years before the battle takes place. And then, of course, the battle was a key moment in history which defined and changed the trajectory of Texas. and of all of us here and the United States. It added not only Texas to the United States ultimately, but really resulted in the Mexican-American War, which then added the whole Southwest to the United States and kind of, in a sense, cut Mexico in half at that point. So huge historical significance to the battle. But we have to always remember that the battle is not the only reason the Alamo is important, that it has functioned for almost 300 years now as a gathering place, as a place that reminded us of our history, as a place that was a mission, as a place that was spiritual, that was a battle site, and that now is a museum to talk to us about the history of Texas, the history of this area, and continues to attract people from all over the world. It's one of the most recognized symbols throughout the world. When you just see simply the picture of the Alamo, everybody knows, oh yeah, that's the Alamo and that's San Antonio. Concepción is the only one of the 5 missions that is completely intact from the colonial period. Its roof, its dome, its towers, its walls, everything is original. It never fell down as the other missions did because of shifting land and soil and climate conditions. And so when you're in Concepción, you're actually seeing what the Franciscans and the Native Americans saw in the 1700s. That's what makes it so exciting. It's such a wonderful place, because there's an intimacy here, but there's also this sense that this is exactly the way they saw it. We're doing exactly the same things that they're doing in the same building that unrestored that they did. So this is the oldest unrestored stone church in the United States, and that to me is a great significant designation, because it has been this continuous place for all of these years. So the colors here, when we restored it, it was not that hard to restore, because all we had to do is dig a little bit under the plaster and we find all the original decorations, the coloring, the way that they made this. It's got this beautiful earth tone colors that make you feel very warm. And so it's a fabulous place to have Sunday Mass, and both of our Sunday Masses are just packed with people, both local people as well as visitors that love to come here and celebrate liturgy with us. So it's a very, very special place. It's got some very historical artwork as well. There is a painting here of St. Francis that dates from 1690. So it predates San Antonio, and it was kind of probably rolled up in the knapsack of one of the Franciscans when they came from Querétaro to begin these missions. And so it is now here. It's probably the oldest, if not one of the oldest, artwork in any church in San Antonio. We have a beautiful painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe from 1750, which came from, we are told, one of the haciendas in central Mexico. And so that is also here. So there's a lot of artwork in the missions. Probably Concepción has the best of the frescoes. If you look at the 2 little side chapels in Concepción, and if you look in the convento, you have some of the, and in the sacristy, you have some of the best restored frescoes that are in any of the 4 missions. It seems like the Franciscans really worked harder here, and because the church didn't fall down, then you don't have all the elements of the sun and the rain and all of those things washing away the frescoes. These frescoes are really, you even see, for example, some of them that are unfinished. You see kind of like where they penciled in what they were going to do and they just never got around to finishing it. So there's a lot here at Concepción to see, and there's a lot to get the feeling of this is what it was like. The other thing about Concepción, which is very rare throughout the missions in the United States and Mexico, is that it has a double solar illumination every August 15th. This is a church named after Mary, the Immaculate Conception, but on August 15th, which is another feast of Mary, the Feast of the Assumption, 2 beams of light come in from 2 windows that face west. And those beams are exactly coordinated at 6:30. One is hitting the face of Mary on the front painting, and the other one is directly under the dome, under the cruciform of the church. And at 6:30, they're exactly coordinated on August 15th every year. It's an absolutely phenomenal situation. How in the world did they build a church where they knew exactly where to put these two windows, where on the Feast of Mary, these two beams of light would be perfectly coordinated at 6:30 in the evening? To me, that's a phenomena that I don't even know if we could duplicate that today. But they did it then. And the reason they did it was it meant a lot to the Native Americans, who were always very much in touch with the elements of astrology, you know, the sun and the moon and the stars, because they lived obviously under the sun. They didn't have buildings. And so for them to see beams of light coming in, they really saw the beams of light coming out from the face of Mary and coming from under the dome of the church. And that meant a lot to the Native Americans to connect the new Christian faith with what was kind of their spirituality, which was always connected to the sun and the moon and the stars and all the other elements of earth. So this is a really phenomenal place, this particular one. So that's Concepción. San Jose is the second in the string of the four, and San Jose was designed to be the queen, to be the showcase, to be the one that the Franciscans to show off in all of northern New Spain. They wanted one church to really grab everybody, and everybody would it's just awe how beautiful it was. And so you see in San Jose, for example, on the outside, these fabulous carvings that you don't see in most of the other churches in northern New Spain or northern Mexico and the Southwest. And that is this fabulous facade with all these angels and saints and decorative qualities that really form a kind of a tree of life that gives you the tree of life of Jesus, basically, where you start at the bottom with the two statues of the grandparents of Jesus, the parents of Mary, Joachim and Anna. And then you have Mary in the form of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then as you go farther up in this beautiful facade, you have St. Joseph. The mission is named after St. Joseph, and he's carrying the child Jesus. And on both sides of him, you have St. Francis, who was the inspiration, and obviously the Franciscans came and started this. And then St. Dominic, who was a good friend of St. Francis, and the Dominicans were also all over the New World. So you have on this facade kind of a storytelling thing of Jesus, but also an inspiration for all those that saw it, that kind of draws you inside the church. You're kind of going through all of these welcoming figures, and you're moving into the church. And that was kind of the idea that they did in Europe very much, with those beautiful facades on those cathedrals. And also the priest that founded San Jose wanted this to be the place where everybody would want to come and look at beautiful. So he got a master craftsman. It's probably one of the best colonial carvings from the Spanish era that exists today in the United States. And then of course you have the rose window, which is in the same church, San Jose, and that also is a fabulous carving. It's got its own history, its own kind of legends that are attached to it as well. So that would really be part of it. When you walk into the compound of San Jose, you just get this huge feeling of first of all, it's a large compound, and then the church itself stands very large, very imposing, very beautiful. And then that convento in the back, which is those beautiful arches that were unrestored because they haven't put a ceiling on that. But that's also a beautiful tribute to the way that the Spanish had their architecture, those beautiful rounded arches that are part of the convento. So San Jose is the most popular of all the missions. It's where the visitor center is, where a little museum is, and so most people go there first. Capistrano is probably the one that most gives you the feeling of what it was like in those days, because there's no development around it. There's no housing, there's no retail. So you get there and all you see is kind of like this delightful, beautiful little intimate small mission in a kind of a woodsy area, you know. And so this is what it was like. And it's only steps from the San Antonio River. In fact, the priest who lives there on the grounds, he's got a problem with snakes that come up from the river and all kinds of critters that come up from the river. That's why you have this sense that this is really what it was like. So many people go to San Juan with that idea. I want to see and feel what was the experience of the the way that they saw and felt those missions at that time. So again, a delightful place. It's the one that we've had a lot of trouble stabilizing because the ground shifts so much there, and it cracks the church, and so we have had to put a lot of money into stabilizing the foundations of it. It's a tiny place. It probably holds 80 people at Mass on Sundays, but it's always packed, and people just love the experience of going to San Juan. Across from San Juan, on the same compound, is the ruins of what was going to be another church. They were going to build a bigger church there, but they never got around to it. Also across is where we have reburied the remains of the indigenous peoples that we found when we were stabilizing the church. We found 13 sets of remains, and they were reburied with indigenous rituals and also Catholic rituals. And so there's a burial ground across from there for that purpose. So it's a very beautiful, wonderful place. If you want to see and kind of feel what it was like then, that would be the place to go. The other thing that's at San Juan is a demonstration farm that the National Park Service has set up to help people understand, well, how did they survive? You know, how did they eat? So this demonstration farm actually is using all the agricultural techniques from the 1700s. And they're growing crops, and they're selling the crops, or they're giving the crops to the food bank. And it gives, especially students, a feel for what was agriculture like back in the 1700s. Espada is the one, probably as I go around the city, that most people, when you ask them, what's your favorite mission, they almost always say Espada. I'm not quite sure why, except that it's delightful, it's beautiful, it's charming. It's got this fabulous doorway that is kind of very Moorish, and that just kind of welcomes you in. And it's tiny. It's probably even smaller than San Juan, so it probably holds about 65 or 70 people. But it is just a delightful place. And it's got a beautiful courtyard. One of the Franciscan brothers keeps the courtyard filled with flowers all year long, and so it's just a wonderful setting for this mission. They have the Franciscan friars have their offices and their convento right next to it, so it's very active. It's very much alive, like it was back in the colonial period. Espada was also one of the places where they made bricks back in the colonial period. And so you see on the facade of Espada, especially the little place that has the bells, a little campanelle, that is kind of made with bricks. And so you don't see that in the other missions. And so that was one of the things that Espada did. It is probably for many people the place where if they have a small wedding or a small funeral or a small baptism, that's where they're going to go, because there's something about it that just attracts them. There's a spirituality to it. It does have an illumination as well. The illumination at Espada is a single illumination, and it is on the feast of St. Francis, because the name of the mission is San Francisco de la Espada. And so it's on the feast of St. Francis, October 4th, and I believe it's around 7 in the morning, where a beam of light comes in from the window if it's a sunny morning, and it illuminates the face of the statue of St. Francis. So again, one of these beautiful spiritual gifts that the Franciscans have left us over the years. First of all, I think the future of the missions depends on the people who come here. And I speak first of the native population of San Antonio, the people who call each mission parish their home. Those are the people that love it. Those are the people that have been here day in and day out, year in and year out. And they're the ones that give life to this place. So I think they're the most important. And the South Side is changing because of the World Heritage. The South Side is changing because of the mission reach of the river. The South Side is changing because you're seeing things like Brooks and Texas A&M and Toyota and all these other new things happening in Port San Antonio. So there's a little bit of anxiety and tension in terms of how will the South Side develop around the missions, because they're so attractive, and because of the parkland being one of the amenities that people like to live close to. And so the question is, will that fundamentally change the nature of these neighborhoods around the missions? Because if it does, I think partly the missions will change too, because we're so dependent day in and day out on the people of the neighborhood. So I think that's a big issue. The numbers that come in terms of visiting the missions from the World Heritage Site, all of that will impact what we will have to do to keep these missions in the best possible condition, because the more people that come, the more wear and tear there are on all of these facilities. And so it's going to cost us more to keep these missions up. That's part of my job, at least for the churches, and it's part of the National Park Service to keep the rest of the buildings and the grounds in good shape. So I think budgets are going to be impacted because of World Heritage. I'm hoping that people will also want to support us more, because I think that people of San Antonio as well as beyond will feel the obligation that now that we are World Heritage, we have to be world class. And so that means money, and that means we have to keep these places in the absolute best condition we can keep them. So that's going to be a challenge going forward. The other challenge, I think, will be infrastructure in this area, and that is, how are the roads, the streets, the bridges, how are the other amenities going to develop? Some of the big corridors like Roosevelt Avenue, how is that going to be, in a way, kind of the gateway to the missions and to World Heritage? How will we fix that up? Because right now there's some dilapidated buildings there, and there's some buildings that don't even have any occupants. And so the city's been moving in that direction. They've been doing some wonderfully responsible approaches to this whole area. So that's going to be a big challenge as we move forward. I'm confident that we're going to do this. I'm confident that it's going to be done right, because there's so many people involved that are so committed to the missions and so committed to this project of being able to not only share these with others, but make them the stable community institutions that they've always been. And that mixture of the visitors and the locals is going to be the challenge that we have to do. But I'm confident that we'll be able to do it.